My name is Lila Bennett. I'm 33 years old. 2 weeks ago, my mother stood at the front of a banquet hall in front of 52 people at my grandmother's 88th birthday dinner and handed my older brother a vintage Rolex, my younger sister a diamond bracelet, and me a velvet box with nothing inside it. She waited until the room went quiet before she smiled and said, "I figured this suited you best. You've always said you don't care about material things." A few people laughed, not loudly, not proudly, but enough. Enough for it to land. Enough for it to stick. I opened the box anyway. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me thought there would be something hidden underneath the lining. There wasn't. Just a faint imprint where something used to sit. Like even the box remembered what it was supposed to hold. And then, under the table, I felt my grandmother's hand slide into mine. 88 years old, skin thin as paper, fingers slightly trembling, but deliberate. Always deliberate. She pressed something small into my palm. Folded. Warm. 7 words. Written in her handwriting. 7 words that quietly unraveled everything my mother had spent years building. Before I tell you what those words said, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to Women Reddit Stories, but only if you're genuinely enjoying stories like this. And drop your city and time in the comments. I always find it fascinating to see where everyone is listening from. Now let me take you back to 10 days before that dinner. The day my mother smiled at me in a way that told me something wasn't right. I live in Ashford, Pennsylvania. Small town. 1 grocery store, 2 gas stations, and a diner that still closes at 2 p.m. I'm a landscape designer. Not the kind you see on TV, no big celebrity projects, no million-dollar backyards. I design practical outdoor spaces for regular people. Patios, gardens, small renovations. I run everything out of a converted spare bedroom in my apartment. Drafting table by the window. Soil samples stacked in labeled bins. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. That's never meant much to my family. In the Bennett family, value is measured differently. My mother, Caroline Bennett, decides who matters. She organizes every holiday, controls every group chat, curates every family photo that ends up online. If you're in her good graces, you're included, front row, center frame. If you're not, you slowly disappear from things without anyone ever saying it out loud. I've been fading out of that frame since I was 24. My brother, Ethan, is 36. He's a financial advisor, owns a house in the suburbs, drives a car that looks expensive even when it's parked. My mother calls him every morning like clockwork. He always answers. My sister, Rachel, is 29. Recently engaged to a guy named Daniel who my mother adores, mostly because he agrees with everything she says before she finishes saying it. Rachel posts pictures with captions like "family is everything" and tags my mom in all of them. And then there's me. The one who drives an hour and a half every Saturday to visit my grandmother, Eleanor Hayes. I fix things around her house. I clean out the gutters in the fall. I bring her groceries. I sit on the porch and listen to her stories, the same ones sometimes, about growing up in Ohio, about meeting my grandfather, about the way things used to be. According to my mother, I only do all that because I'm waiting for an inheritance. That's the version of me she tells people. And people believe her. Everyone except my grandmother. 12 years ago, when I was 21, I made a mistake. Not a big one. Just honest. I stopped by my mother's house unannounced one afternoon. She wasn't home yet, so I let myself in with the spare key she'd given me years earlier. I was setting a bag of groceries on the counter when I saw a bank statement sitting there. Joint account. Eleanor Hayes and Caroline Bennett. There were multiple withdrawals. Large ones. Over the span of a few months, about $18,000 total. The descriptions were vague. Home improvement. Contractor payment. Appliance upgrade. My grandmother hadn't mentioned any renovations. But my mother had just redone her kitchen. I didn't accuse her. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked. Mom, does Grandma know you're using money from her account? That was it. One question. Her reaction was immediate. Her face changed, not confusion, not guilt at first. Anger. Sharp and controlled. You don't question me, she said. Especially not about family finances. I'm not questioning, I told her. I'm asking. That distinction didn't matter to her. Within a week, I had a label. Difficult. Ungrateful. Disrespectful. My brother stopped returning my calls as often. My sister became polite in a distant, careful way. Conversations would go quiet when I entered the room. Invitations came less frequently. It wasn't one big moment. It was gradual. Quiet. That's how exclusion works when it's done well. I didn't know it then, but my grandmother noticed everything. She saw the withdrawals. She saw how I was being treated. She saw the way my mother reshaped the story. And instead of confronting it directly, she started planning. I wouldn't learn that part until much later. 3 weeks before her birthday, my mother announced she was hosting a formal dinner at Hawthorne Ridge Club, the nicest venue within 30 miles. 50 guests. Catered meal. A slideshow. Speeches. She called me on a Wednesday evening. Lila, I need your help, she said, her voice soft in that careful way she uses when she wants something. You're good with details. Can you handle the decorations, the slideshow, and coordinating with the caterer? Of course. I said yes. I always say yes. Rachel and I will handle the program and speeches, she added. I paused. Am I giving a speech? I asked. There was a brief silence. Not long, but long enough. It's more of a family tribute, she said. We're keeping it intimate. Intimate. 50 people. And I wasn't considered close enough. I let it go. Not because it didn't bother me, but because pushing back never changed anything. Instead, I called my grandmother. Did Mom tell you about the party? I asked. She mentioned something, she said. Her voice was calm, steady. Are you coming? Of course I am. Good, she said. That's all I need. Something about the way she said it made me pause. Like she already knew how the night would unfold. I didn't understand it yet. But I would. 2 days after that call, I was standing in the floral aisle of a grocery store in Ashford, staring at 3 different shades of white roses and trying to decide which one looked the least like a last-minute choice. That's what my role in this family has become, the person who makes things look right, even when they aren't. I had my phone tucked between my shoulder and ear, listening to the event coordinator from Hawthorne Ridge go over seating logistics. 52 confirmed guests, she said. Do you want round tables or long banquet style? Round, I said. Easier for conversation. Great. And the podium will be centered near the projection screen. Whoever is speaking will have full visibility. Whoever is speaking. Not me. Perfect, I said anyway. We finalized the details, and I hung up, placing 2 bouquets in my cart, one ivory, one soft white. I figured I'd decide later. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it didn't matter. On my drive home, my phone buzzed. Rachel. I almost didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because conversations with Rachel had become curated. Like she was always choosing her words carefully, making sure nothing she said could be traced back to her later. I answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, I said. Hey, she replied. Quick question, did Mom ask you to handle the slideshow? She did. Okay, good. Just make sure you include more recent photos. Like the ones from my engagement party. Of course. Sure, I said. Send me the ones you want included. I already did. Check your email. I pulled into my apartment parking lot and put the car in park. Got it, I said. There was a pause. Not accidental. Intentional. Then she said, lowering her voice slightly, Mom's really trying to make this night special. I leaned back in my seat. I can tell. Another pause. You know she means well, Rachel added. There it was. Not an apology. Not even a defense. Just a soft suggestion that I should interpret everything in the most generous way possible. I'm sure she does, I said. We ended the call shortly after. That night, I sat at my drafting table, laptop open, folders of scanned photos spread across the screen. Childhood birthdays. Christmas mornings. Old black and white pictures of my grandmother and grandfather. I adjusted lighting, cropped edges, timed transitions to music. I chose At Last by Etta James. My grandmother loved that song. Used to hum it while cooking. I spent hours on that slideshow. Not because anyone would notice. Because she would. 3 days later, I drove out to my grandmother's house like I always did on Saturdays. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same as always, white siding, a little worn, porch railings slightly uneven where I'd been meaning to fix them. She was already outside, sitting in her rocking chair, a blanket draped over her knees even though the weather didn't quite call for it. You're late, she said as I walked up the steps. 7 minutes, I said, smiling. She nodded. That's how it starts. I laughed and set the grocery bags down inside before joining her on the porch. For a while, we talked about nothing important. The neighbor's new fence. The weather. A recipe she wanted to try. And then, without looking at me, she said, Your mother's planning quite the event. I leaned back in the chair. Yeah. It's elaborate. She nodded slowly. She's always been good at presentations. There was something in the way she said it, not admiration, not quite criticism either. Just observation. You okay with it? I asked. She turned her head then and looked at me directly. Are you? I hesitated. I'm used to it, I said. That's not what I asked. I exhaled, watching the trees at the edge of her property sway slightly in the wind. No, I admitted. I'm not. She nodded once, like she'd been expecting that answer. Good, she said. I blinked. Good. You shouldn't be. That surprised me more than anything else she could have said. Before I could respond, she shifted in her chair slightly and reached for her glass of iced tea. Come inside, she said. I need to grab something. I followed her in, expecting maybe a document, a recipe, something small. Instead, she walked straight past the kitchen and toward the hallway that led to the front door. Where are we going? I asked. Out, she said simply. 20 minutes later, we were parked in front of a bank on Main Street. First Community Bank. Small. Local. The kind of place where the tellers know your name. I just need a few minutes, she said as she unbuckled her seatbelt. For what? She looked at me, eyes sharp despite her age. To take care of something that should have been handled a long time ago. I didn't press. She walked in with her cane, steady, purposeful. I stayed in the car for a moment, then followed her inside, taking a seat in the waiting area while she spoke quietly with a bank officer. They disappeared into a private office. 15 minutes passed. I flipped through a magazine without really reading it, my mind circling back to everything that had felt slightly off lately, my mother's sudden sweetness, Rachel's careful tone, the scale of the party. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. When my grandmother came back out, she walked slower, but there was a calmness about her that hadn't been there before. Like she'd just finished something important. As we stepped outside, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small. "Here," she said, placing it in my hand. I looked down. A key. Small. Brass. Worn slightly at the edges. "A safety deposit box?" I asked. She nodded. "Keep it with you." "In case of what?" She held my gaze. "In case you ever need to open what's already yours." The words didn't fully register. "What do you mean?" She smiled slightly, not unkindly. "You'll understand when the time comes." I turned the key over in my fingers, the metal cool against my skin. "Grandma." "Not yet," she said gently. "Some things need to happen in the right order." That sentence stayed with me the entire drive back to her house. The right order. Later that afternoon, after I'd fixed a loose board on her porch and made sure her groceries were put away, I sat with her again as the sun started to dip lower. She was quieter than usual. Not distant. Just focused. At one point, she reached over and took my hand. "You remind me of your grandfather," she said. I smiled. "In what way?" "He didn't care about appearances either," she said. "Drove your great-grandmother crazy." I laughed softly. "That sounds about right." She squeezed my hand once, firm. "It's a good thing," she added. I nodded, but something about the moment felt heavier than it should have. Like she wasn't just making conversation. Like she was marking something. When I left that evening, the key was in my purse, tucked into the small inner pocket where I kept things I didn't want to lose. I didn't know then how important it was. I just knew it didn't feel random. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. The event timeline was finalized. The guest list confirmed. The slideshow is nearly complete. And then, for days before the dinner, my mother called for what she described as a final planning meeting. At her house. All three of us were expected to be there. I arrived 10 minutes early. Rachel was already sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, eating something out of a bowl. My mother stood at the head of the table, papers spread out in front of her like she was about to conduct a board meeting. "Good," she said when she saw me. "We can start." She handed each of us a printed schedule. Dinner at 6:30. Speeches at 7:45. Then the presentation. I looked up. "Presentation?" She smiled. "I'm giving out a few of your grandmother's heirloom pieces," she said. "Something symbolic." Rachel's lips pressed together, like she was trying not to smile too much. Ethan straightened slightly. "And me?" I asked. My mother's eyes met mine. There was a pause. Then that same smile. "Something special," she said. Rachel let out a small breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh she was trying to hide. I glanced at Ethan. He looked down at his bowl. Didn't say a word. And in that moment, sitting at that table, holding that printed schedule, with a small brass key in my purse and a sentence echoing in my head, in the right order, I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to admit before. This wasn't just a party. It was a setup. I just didn't know yet what role I was supposed to play in it. I drove home from that meeting with both hands tight on the steering wheel, the kind of grip that makes your fingers ache but you don't loosen it anyway. Something special. That's what my mother had said. Not what. Not why. Just enough to keep me off balance. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car with the engine off, staring at the dark windows of the building like they might tell me something if I looked long enough. They didn't. So I went upstairs, set my keys on the counter, and pulled the small brass key out of my purse. I turned it over between my fingers again. A safety deposit box. In case you ever need to open what's already yours. I didn't understand it. Not fully. But I could feel it, the shape of something underneath everything that had been happening. Something deliberate. Something planned. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just reacting to my mother. I was waiting. The next morning, I called my grandmother. "Hey," I said when she picked up. "Morning, baby. You busy?" "Never too busy for you." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Mom had us over last night," I said. "For the party." I figured she would. She's doing some kind of presentation. Giving out heirlooms. There was a pause on the line. Not long. But enough. "And you?" she asked. "She said she has something special planned for me." Silence again. Softer this time. Then, "I see." "You see?" I repeated. "That's it?" "What would you like me to say?" she asked gently. I let out a breath. "I don't know. That it's not going to be what I think it is?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she said, "Come by this afternoon if you can." "I can." "Good," she said. "We'll talk then." A few hours later, I was back on the road, heading toward her house. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that makes everything feel quieter than it is. I kept thinking about the tone in her voice, calm, steady, but with something underneath it. Not worry. Certainty. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already on the porch again, same chair, same blanket, same glass of iced tea. Like nothing had changed. But something had. I could feel it. I walked up the steps and sat down beside her without saying anything at first. She didn't speak either. We just sat there for a minute, listening to the wind move through the trees. Then I said, "You knew." She didn't look at me. "I had an idea," she said. I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Of course you did." She turned her head then, studying my face. "You're upset." "I'm tired," I said honestly. It's like everything with her has layers. Nothing is ever just what it is. She nodded slowly. "That's because it isn't," she said. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "She's going to do something at that dinner," I said. "I don't know exactly what, but I know it's not going to be kind." "No," my grandmother said quietly. "It won't be." That landed heavier than anything else. Not denial. Not reassurance. Agreement. I turned to her. "And you're okay with that?" She held my gaze. "I'm prepared for it." Prepared. The same word, in a different form. I swallowed. "What does that mean?" She reached over and took my hand. Her grip was light, but steady. "It means," she said, "that not everything needs to be fought in the moment." I frowned slightly. "So I'm just supposed to sit there and let it happen?" "No," she said. "You're supposed to let it reveal itself." I stared at her. "That sounds like the same thing." "It isn't," she said. "There's a difference between being silent because you have no power, and being silent because you know something no one else does." That stopped me. Because suddenly, the key in my purse felt heavier. "I don't understand," I said. "I know," she replied. "And that's all right." She squeezed my hand once. "Listen to me, Lila," she said, her voice firm now. "Whatever your mother does at that dinner, don't react." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. That's a lot to ask. I wouldn't ask it if it didn't matter. I looked away, out at the yard. What if she humiliates me? I asked quietly. My grandmother didn't hesitate. She might. The honesty of that answer hit harder than anything else could have. I nodded slowly. "And you still want me to just sit there?" "I want you to wait," she said. "For what?" "For the truth to catch up." I let out a breath, long and unsteady. "And it will?" She smiled slightly. "It always does." We sat in silence after that. Not uncomfortable. Just full. Eventually, I stood up and walked down the porch steps, needing to move, to do something with the energy building in my chest. I checked the fence line, adjusted a loose panel, kicked a stone back into place where it had shifted out of the garden bed. Small things. Things I could control. When I came back up, she was watching me. "You're doing it again," she said. "Doing what?" "Trying to fix everything around you so you don't have to sit with what's inside." I huffed out a quiet laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching you your whole life." I sat back down. "I don't want to go," I admitted. She didn't react right away. Then she said, "But you will." "Yeah," I said. "I will." "Because you keep your word." I nodded. She leaned back in her chair slightly. "Good," she said. "Then we're in agreement." "We are." "You're going," she said. "And you're not reacting." I exhaled slowly. "Okay," I said. Not because I fully understood, but because I trusted her. The next few days felt stretched. Like time was moving, but not smoothly. I finished the slideshow. Double-checked every photo, every transition. Packed up the decorations. Confirmed the florist delivery. Finalized the seating chart with the venue coordinator. Everything was ready. Everything except me. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every possible version of what could happen. Maybe it would be subtle. A comment. A joke. Maybe it would be obvious. Maybe it would be worse than I was imagining. Every version ended the same way, me sitting there, expected to take it. And for once, I wasn't sure I could. But then I'd hear her voice in my head. "Don't react. Wait. The truth will catch up." I didn't know what that meant. But I held on to it anyway. The morning of the dinner arrived quietly. Too quietly. I got ready slowly, choosing a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. I tied my hair back, kept my makeup minimal. I didn't want to give my mother anything she could use. When I picked up my purse, I felt the weight of the key again. Still there. Still unexplained. But somehow, reassuring. By the time I got in the car and started driving toward Hawthorne Ridge Club, the sky had cleared. Bright. Almost too bright. The kind of day that looks perfect from the outside. I pulled into the parking lot an hour early. Not because I needed to be. Because I needed a moment. I sat there with my hands resting on the steering wheel, the engine idling, and said it out loud for the first time. "Just wait." The words sounded small in the quiet car. But they steadied me. After a minute, I turned off the engine, grabbed my bag, and stepped out. Inside, the staff was already setting up. Tables dressed in white linens. Centerpieces placed carefully in the middle of each one, the exact shade of white I'd chosen after standing in that grocery store aisle for too long. The projector was set up near the front. I walked over, plugged in my laptop, tested the slideshow. Etta James filled the empty room softly. At last. I let it play for a few seconds, then paused it. Everything was in place. Exactly how it was supposed to be. And standing there in that quiet ballroom, with no guests yet, no noise, no expectations pressing in. I had one clear thought. Whatever happens tonight, it's already been set in motion. I just didn't know yet how it would end. Guests started arriving a little after 6. At first, it was quiet, just a few early arrivals, coats being handed off, polite greetings echoing against the high ceiling. I stood near the entrance, directing people toward their tables, answering small questions, adjusting things that didn't really need adjusting. It gave me something to do with my hands. By 6:20, the room had filled out. Conversations layered over each other, laughter rising and falling in waves. The kind of sound that feels warm if you're part of it, and distant if you're not. I wasn't. I moved through the space like I always do at family events. Present, helpful, but not quite included. I checked on the caterers, made sure the drinks were set, fixed a centerpiece that had shifted slightly off-center. No one asked who had done the setup. No one ever does. At 6:35, my brother Ethan arrived. He walked in with that same steady confidence he carries everywhere, tailored jacket, easy smile. He spotted me near the bar and gave a small nod. "Hey," he said when he reached me. "Hey. Looks good in here," he added, glancing around. "Thanks." He nodded again, like that covered everything, and then someone called his name from across the room. He turned immediately, lifting a hand in acknowledgement, already moving toward them. And just like that, he was gone. Rachel came in a few minutes later with Daniel. She looked perfect. Hair done, dress fitted exactly right, a soft smile that seemed practiced but convincing. "Lila," she said, stepping in for a quick hug that didn't quite land. "Everything looks amazing." "Thank you." Daniel gave me a polite nod. "Great setup," he said. "Appreciate it." Rachel glanced around the room, then leaned in slightly. "Mom's on her way," she said, her voice dropping just enough to feel intentional. "Of course she is." Rachel hesitated for a second, like she wanted to say something else, then didn't. "We'll talk later," she said instead. I nodded. "Sure." At exactly 6:50, the doors opened again. My mother arrived last. She always does. Black dress. Pearl earrings. Hairstyle just enough to look effortless while clearly taking time. She stepped into the room like she was stepping onto a stage, scanning the space, taking it in. People noticed. They always notice. "Oh, Caroline, everything looks beautiful," someone said as she passed. She smiled, placing a hand lightly over her chest. "Thank you," she said. "It's important to me that tonight is perfect." I stood 10 feet away, holding a stack of printed programs. She didn't look at me. Not yet. She moved through the room, greeting people, accepting compliments, touching shoulders, laughing softly at things that weren't particularly funny. By the time she reached me, the room had fully settled into itself. "Lila," she said, like she was just noticing me for the first time. "You handled everything?" "I did." She glanced around again. "Good," she said. "It came together nicely." Came together. Like it had assembled itself. "Let me know when you're ready to start the slideshow," I said. "I will." And then she moved on. Just like that. At 7:05, my grandmother arrived. Ethan was at the door to meet her, offering his arm as she stepped inside. She wore a soft gray dress, simple, elegant, the kind of thing that didn't demand attention but held it anyway. The room shifted when she entered. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But noticeably. Conversations softened. Heads turned. She moved slowly, but not weakly. Every step deliberate, every movement controlled. When her eyes found mine across the room, she gave me the smallest nod. I felt something in my chest settle. I nodded back. Dinner moved forward smoothly. Plates were served. Glasses filled. Conversations picked up again. I sat at table 7, not the closest to the front, not the farthest either. A middle placement that felt intentional in its neutrality. I made polite conversation with a cousin I only saw once a year. Laughed at the right moments. Answered questions about work. But under the table, my hand stayed folded tightly in my lap. Waiting. At 7:50, my mother stood. She didn't rush. She never rushes. She walked to the front of the room, took the microphone, and waited for the noise to settle. It did. It always does. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice warm, practiced. "We're here to celebrate a remarkable woman. My mother. A soft round of applause moved through the room. She smiled, letting it land. 88 years of strength, of wisdom, of dedication to family. She spoke well. She always has. Stories, carefully chosen. Moments, slightly polished. Just enough emotion to feel genuine without ever losing control. I watched my grandmother. She sat still, hands folded, expression calm. Not smiling. Not reacting. Just observing. And tonight, my mother continued, I wanted to do something meaningful. Something that reflects the legacy she's built. There it was. The shift. I felt it before she even said the next words. I've chosen a few pieces that represent that legacy, she said. Things that should be passed down to those who will carry it forward. A murmur moved through the room. Interest. Curiosity. Anticipation. My pulse picked up. 3 boxes sat on the small table beside her. 2 of them were newer. Polished. Wrapped with care. The third was older. Slightly worn. No ribbon. I hadn't noticed it earlier. Or maybe I had. And didn't let myself think about it. My mother reached for the first box. Rachel, she said. My sister stood slowly, already emotional. This bracelet, my mother continued as she opened the box, represents grace and commitment. The kind of qualities you've always shown. The diamond bracelet caught the light, sending small reflections across the tablecloth. Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth, tears forming instantly. Mom. She stepped forward, hugging her tightly as the room applauded. Phones came out. Pictures were taken. I didn't look at Rachel. I looked at my grandmother. Still calm. Still watching. My mother set the empty box aside and picked up the second. Ethan. My brother stood. This watch, she said, opening it carefully, represents responsibility. The ability to carry something forward and take care of it. He smiled, stepping up to accept it. Thank you, he said. More applause. More approval. 2 boxes down. 1 left. The room shifted again. Subtly. People started to notice. Eyes moved. Whispers, quiet but present, passed between tables. I could feel it, the attention turning. Slowly. Toward me. My mother didn't rush. Of course she didn't. She let the moment build. Let the silence stretch just enough. Then she picked up the final box. The older one. She turned. And started walking toward my table. Every step measured. Every movement deliberate. The room grew quieter with each one. I could hear the faint clink of silverware being set down. Someone cleared their throat. My heartbeat was loud now. Too loud. She stopped in front of me. Looked down. Smiled. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't an afterthought. This was the point. She held out the box. And for you, Lila, she said, her voice carrying easily across the room, something that felt appropriate. A few people leaned forward. Waiting. Watching. I took the box. It was lighter than it should have been. I opened it. Empty. Just worn velvet lining and a faint outline where something used to be. A couple of people laughed. Not many. But enough. Enough to echo. My throat tightened. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept them steady enough to hold the box open for a second longer. Just long enough for everyone to see. Then I closed it. Slowly. Under the table, something brushed against my hand. I stilled. And then I felt it. My grandmother's fingers. Light. Certain. She pressed something into my palm. Folded paper. Small. Warm. I closed my hand around it instinctively. Across from me, my mother was still smiling. Waiting. Waiting for a reaction. Waiting for something to confirm the version of me she'd been telling everyone for years. My chest tightened. My throat burned. Every instinct in my body told me to say something. To stand up. To break the moment open and let everything spill out. But instead, I heard her voice in my head. Don't react. Wait. I looked up at my mother. Held her gaze. And said evenly, "Thank you." Just that. 2 words. Nothing more. Her smile flickered. Just for a second. Almost too quick to notice. But I saw it. The room shifted. Confusion, slight but present. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I set the box on the table in front of me. Closed. Final. And kept my hands in my lap. Around the folded paper. The rest of the room exhaled slowly, like it had been holding its breath. Somewhere, a chair scraped softly against the floor. My mother turned back toward the front, recovering quickly, moving on as if everything had gone exactly as planned. But something had already changed. I could feel it. I didn't know what was written on that paper yet. But I knew one thing. Whatever it said, it mattered more than anything that had just happened in that room. I didn't open the note right away. I sat there for a few more minutes, hands still in my lap, fingers curled tightly around that small piece of folded paper like it might disappear if I let go too soon. Around me, the room slowly came back to life. Conversations restarted, cautious at first, then louder, like people were trying to move past what had just happened without acknowledging it directly. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone laughed too loudly at something that wasn't particularly funny. My mother had already shifted back into hosting mode. Smiling. Circulating. Accepting compliments. Like the moment with the empty box had been nothing more than a small detail in an otherwise perfect evening. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at anyone. I just sat there, breathing slowly, feeling the paper press against my palm. Waiting. After a few minutes, I pushed my chair back quietly and stood. "I'll be right back," I said to no one in particular. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. I walked out of the main room and down the hallway toward the restrooms. The carpet softened my footsteps, the noise from the banquet hall fading with each step until it became a distant hum. I pushed open the restroom door, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. Silence. Real silence. I leaned back against the door for a second, closing my eyes. Then I opened my hand. The paper was slightly creased now from how tightly I'd been holding it. I unfolded it carefully. Once. Then again. My grandmother's handwriting, steady, deliberate. 7 words. "Everything real is already in your name." I stared at it. Once. Twice. A third time, just to make sure I wasn't misreading it. "Everything real, already in your name." Below it, there was a phone number. And 1 word written underneath. Callahan. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The key. The bank. The way she'd said, in the right order. It wasn't random. None of it was. I pressed the paper flat against the counter, my fingers resting on either side of it. "What did you do?" I whispered, more to myself than anything else. Because whatever this was, it was big. I could feel that much. I folded the note back up slowly, carefully, like it mattered how I handled it. Then I took it and slipped it into my wallet, tucking it behind my ID. Safe. Close. I splashed a little water on my face, steadied myself, and looked at my reflection. I didn't look different. But I felt, anchored in a way I hadn't 10 minutes ago. Like the ground under me had shifted, not out from under me, but into place. When I walked back into the banquet hall, nothing outward had changed. The music was playing softly now. Dessert plates were being set out. People were moving around, talking, laughing. But I noticed things I hadn't before. The way people glanced at me, quick, uncertain. The way a conversation near the dessert table lowered slightly as I passed. The way my mother's eyes tracked me from across the room. She was watching. Waiting. Still expecting something. I moved through the room calmly, stopping to thank the caterer, checking on the dessert table, making sure everything was running smoothly. The same things I'd been doing all evening. Except now, I wasn't doing them to hold everything together. I was doing them because I chose to. There's a difference. A cousin approached me near the drink station. "Hey," she said, her voice careful. "Are you okay?" I smiled lightly. "I'm fine," I said. "It's Grandma's night." She nodded, relieved at the easy answer, and drifted away. I kept moving. Across the room, my mother intercepted me near the dessert table. "You're handling this well," she said. Her tone was measured. Controlled. Evaluating. "There's nothing to handle," I replied. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I just want you to understand," she said, lowering her voice, "that this wasn't meant to be hurtful." "Of course it wasn't." "It's symbolic," she added. I nodded. "I understand." She studied my face for a moment, searching for something. A crack. A reaction. Anything she could use. She didn't find it. "Good," she said finally, though there was tension underneath the word. She turned and walked away. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small standing there. I felt steady. A few minutes later, I found my grandmother back at her table. Most of the guests had drifted toward the dessert area or the bar. The space around her was quieter now. She sat in her chair, hands folded lightly, looking exactly the same as she had all evening. Calm. Certain. I walked over and sat beside her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, without looking at me, "You did exactly right." I swallowed. "You knew," I said softly. She turned her head slightly. "I hoped," she replied. I let out a quiet breath. "I read the note. I figured you would." "What does it mean?" I asked. She studied my face for a moment. "Not here," she said. I nodded. That made sense. Everything with her seemed to follow that same pattern. Right timing. Right place. "Thank you," I said instead. She reached over and patted my hand gently. "You're welcome, baby." We sat there for a few more minutes, watching the room move around us. Eventually, people began gathering their things, saying their goodbyes. The night was winding down. At around 9:45, I helped coordinate the last of the cleanup, making sure everything was packed up properly. The slideshow equipment was shut down, decorations collected. I moved through it all on autopilot. Focused. Calm. By the time we stepped outside, the air had cooled. The parking lot was quieter now, only a few cars left. Ethan had already said his goodbye and left early. Rachel stood near her car with Daniel, talking in low voices. My mother was near the entrance, saying her final goodnights to a couple from the country club. I walked my grandmother to my car. She moved slowly, but steadily, her hand resting lightly on my arm. Once she was settled in the passenger seat, I closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. For a moment, I just stood there, looking out across the parking lot. At the building. At the place where, less than 2 hours ago, my mother had handed me an empty box in front of everyone. And somehow, it didn't feel like the defining moment anymore. I got in the car and started the engine. We pulled out of the lot in silence. For the first 10 minutes of the drive, neither of us spoke. The road stretched ahead, dark and quiet, headlights cutting through the night. Then my grandmother said, without turning her head, the box was empty long before tonight. My grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. I figured. She nodded. Your mother's been holding on to things that were never hers to begin with. I glanced at her briefly. What did you do? I asked. She smiled faintly. I made sure that when the time came, there would be a difference between what looked real and what actually was. I let that settle. The key in my purse. The note in my wallet. The phone number. Callahan, I said. Who is that? My attorney, she replied. He has everything. Everything. I swallowed. Everything what? She turned her head then, looking at me directly. Everything that belongs to you. The road blurred for a second before I blinked it back into focus. What are you talking about? You'll understand on Monday, she said calmly. Monday? Call him, she said. He's expecting you. Expecting me. The word landed heavily. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Not empty silence. Full silence. By the time we reached her house, my mind was racing, trying to piece together something I didn't have enough information to understand yet. I helped her inside, made sure she was settled, her tea within reach, her blanket adjusted. At the door, as I was about to leave, she reached out and caught my wrist. I turned back. Her grip was stronger than I expected. You were never what she said you were, she said. My throat tightened. I know, I said quietly. She shook her head slightly. No, she said. You're just now starting to. I didn't trust myself to respond to that. So I just nodded. Then I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and stood on her porch for a long moment, the night air cool against my skin. The empty box was still sitting on the passenger seat of my car. I looked at it through the window. And for the first time, it didn't feel like an insult. It felt like a beginning. Monday was 2 days away. And whatever my grandmother had been building, I was about to find out. I didn't sleep much that weekend. Not because I was upset anymore, that part had settled into something quieter, but because my mind wouldn't stop moving. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same things. The empty box. My mother's smile. My grandmother's hand slipping that note into mine. Everything real is already in your name. The words looped, over and over, like they were trying to anchor themselves somewhere deeper. By Sunday night, I stopped trying to make sense of it. I just waited. Monday morning came faster than I expected. By 7:30 a.m., I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. My phone sat in front of me. The number was saved. Callahan. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, at exactly 8:02 a.m., I picked up the phone and dialed. 1 ring. 2. Callahan and Pierce Law Offices, a woman's voice answered. Professional. Clear. Hi, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My name is Lila Bennett. Eleanor Hayes is my grandmother. She asked me to call. There was a brief pause. Then, yes, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Callahan has been expecting you. Expecting. Not checking. Not confirming. Expecting. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. He has an opening at 1:30 this afternoon. Would you be able to come in? It was about an hour and 45-minute drive. I can, I said. Perfect. We'll see you then. The call ended. I sat there for a moment, staring at the blank screen. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and started getting ready. The drive felt longer than usual. The sky was clear, the roads mostly empty, but my thoughts kept circling the same questions. What did she do? What does everything actually mean? Why didn't she tell me sooner? By the time I reached the office, my hands were steady again. Callahan and Pierce was in a brick building on a quiet street in Lancaster. Nothing flashy. No glass towers or polished marble. Just a solid, practical place that looked like it had been there a long time. I parked, took a breath, and went inside. The lobby smelled faintly like coffee and paper. A woman behind the desk looked up and smiled. "Lila Bennett?" "Yes. Mr. Callahan will be with you shortly." I sat down, my hands resting in my lap, trying not to overthink every second that passed. 5 minutes later, a door opened. "Ms. Bennett?" I stood. Thomas Callahan looked exactly how I imagined he would. Mid-60s. Gray hair. Glasses resting low on his nose. The kind of presence that felt steady without needing to prove it. He shook my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know. He'd known about me for a while. He led me into his office and gestured for me to sit. A folder sat on his desk. Thick. Organized. Prepared. He sat across from me and opened it carefully. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to make sure you understand something clearly. What your grandmother put in place was done properly. Legally. Thoroughly." I nodded slowly. "Okay." He slid the first document toward me. 12 years ago," he said, "your grandmother established an irrevocable trust." The words landed, but didn't fully connect yet. "One's assets are placed into that trust," he continued, "they no longer belong to the individual. They belong to the trust itself." I leaned forward slightly. "And who controls the trust?" I asked. He looked at me directly. "You do." The room felt very still for a moment. "I'm sorry, what?" "You are the sole beneficiary," he said. "And as of now, you also have controlling interest over its assets." I sat back, my mind trying to catch up. "What assets?" I asked. He didn't rush the answer. "The Hayes property," he said first. "Your grandmother's home and the surrounding land, approximately 32 acres. My breath caught slightly. "That's in my name?" "Has been for over a decade," he said. I stared at him. "She removed your mother's name from the deed shortly after establishing the trust." Quietly. Legally. I didn't say anything. "I couldn't." He continued. "There's also an investment account. Your grandmother contributed consistently over the past 12 years. Modest amounts at first, $300 to $500 monthly, but with compounded growth, it now sits just under $520,000. The number didn't feel real. "And the jewelry?" I asked, my voice quieter now. He nodded. "The original pieces are secured in a safety deposit box at First Community Bank. The key, including the engagement ring, the bracelet, and several other heirloom items." I swallowed. "And the ones from the dinner?" He gave a small, knowing look. "Replicas," he said. "High quality, but not authentic." I let out a breath, somewhere between a laugh and disbelief. "She planned that," I said. "Yes," he replied simply. 12 years ago?" "Shortly before establishing the trust," he confirmed. "She anticipated complications." Complications. That was one way to put it. I looked down at the documents in front of me. Every page precise. Every signature deliberate. "She knew," I said quietly. "She knew what was going to happen. She understood patterns," he said. "And she acted accordingly." I pressed my fingers lightly against my temple. "Why didn't she tell me?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly. "She believed," he said, "that if you knew too soon, you might try to confront your mother." I let out a small, breathless laugh. "I would have." "Yes," he said. And your mother would have responded in a way that could have complicated things legally. That made sense. As much as I didn't like it. She protected the structure by keeping you out of it, he added. I nodded slowly. That must have been difficult. It was, he said. For both of you. I sat there for a moment, letting everything settle. The house. The land. The account. The jewelry. Everything real. Already in my name. It wasn't just a sentence. It was literal. What happens now? I asked. He folded his hands on the desk. Now, he said, nothing changes unless you want it to. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? You are under no obligation to announce this, he explained. No requirement to confront anyone. The trust exists independently of your family dynamics. I thought about that. About my mother. About Rachel. About Ethan. They're going to find out, I said. He nodded. Most likely. How? He gave a small, almost sympathetic smile. Your sister will eventually take that bracelet to be resized. Your brother may have that watch serviced. Any professional will identify them as replicas fairly quickly. I hadn't even thought of that. How long? I asked. Days, he said. Possibly weeks. I exhaled slowly. And when they do? He slid a card across the desk. You call me before responding to anything, he said. No matter what's said or threatened. I picked up the card. Held it for a second. Then nodded. Okay. We spent another 30 minutes going over details. Paperwork. Access. Next steps. By the time I walked out of that office, the world felt different. Not because anything had visibly changed. But because I understood it now. The key. The note. The timing. My grandmother hadn't just protected me. She'd built something. Carefully. Quietly. Over years. And she'd waited until the exact right moment to hand it to me. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. The empty box was still on the passenger seat. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It looked the same. Felt the same. But it didn't mean the same thing anymore. I set it back down and finally started the car. As I pulled out onto the road, my phone buzzed. My mother. I stared at the screen for a second. Then I answered. Hello? We need to talk, she said immediately. No greeting. No warmth. Her voice was tight. Controlled. About to crack. I kept my tone even. About what? A pause. Then. The jewelry. That was all she said. No explanation. No attempt to soften it. Just those two words, sharp and controlled. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the wheel. What about it? I asked. You know exactly what about it, she snapped. Rachel took the bracelet to be resized this morning. There it was. Faster than I expected. And? I said. They told her it's not real, my mother said, her voice tightening further. They said it's a replica. I let a small pause settle between us. Okay, I said. Okay, she repeated, disbelief creeping in. That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say? I asked calmly. That you didn't switch them, she said immediately. That you didn't take the real pieces and replace them with fakes. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. I didn't switch anything, I said. That's not what it looks like, she shot back. I pulled to a stop at a red light, watching it glow steadily in front of me. You gave me an empty box, I said evenly. Remember? Silence. Brief. But heavy. That's not the point, she said finally. It kind of is, I replied. Her breathing shifted on the other end of the line. You've been going to that house every week, she continued. You had access. You could have taken them at any time. I didn't, I said. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to ask Grandma, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. You're lying, she said quietly. I'm not, I replied. The light turned green. I drove forward. Call her, I repeated. Ask her directly. The line went dead. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. About 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text this time. Rachel. Did you know? I read it once. Then again. Then I locked my phone and set it down on the passenger seat. I could have answered. I could have explained everything. I could have told her about the trust, the replicas, the lawyer, the years of planning. But I didn't. Because it wouldn't land the way she needed it to. Some things have to be discovered. Not told. That evening, I was sitting on the front porch of my apartment, a cup of tea in my hands, when my phone rang again. Ethan. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, I said. There was a pause. Then, I had the watch looked at. I leaned back slightly in my chair. And? I asked. It's plated, he said. Base metal. Worth maybe $50. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was tired. Yeah, I said quietly. Another pause. I didn't know, he added. I know, I said. And I meant it. He exhaled slowly. Mom thinks you did something, he said. I didn't. I figured, he replied. That surprised me. I didn't say anything for a second. Then, she's going to call you, he said. She already did. Of course she did, he muttered. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable. Just real. I should have said something, he said finally. About what? About the way she treated you, he said. All these years. I looked out at the street, watching a car pass slowly. Yeah, I said. You should have. He didn't argue. I know, he said. That was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. We didn't fix anything in that moment. But something shifted. And sometimes, that's enough to start. The next morning, my mother went to my grandmother's house. I know because my grandmother told me later. She didn't call first. She didn't ask. She just showed up. Walked in like she still owned the place. Did you give her the real jewelry? My mother demanded. My grandmother was sitting in her chair by the window. Calm. As always. I gave away what belonged to me, she said. That was family property, my mother snapped. No, my grandmother replied. It was mine. My mother's voice rose. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. My grandmother didn't raise hers. You embarrassed yourself, she said. Silence. Sharp. You think you can just rewrite everything, my mother said. I didn't rewrite anything, my grandmother replied. I clarified it. Another silence. Then my mother said the thing she always says when she's losing control. She manipulated you, she said. Layla. She's been after your money for years. My grandmother smiled. Small. Almost sad. The only person who's taken anything from me without asking, she said, is you. That was it. That was the moment. Everything my mother had built, every story, every version of events, every carefully constructed narrative, collapsed under one sentence. She left shortly after that. Didn't slam the door. Didn't make a scene. Just left. And for the first time in my life, she didn't have the last word. In a small town, things don't stay quiet for long. By the end of the week, people knew. Not the full details. Not the legal structure. But enough. They knew the jewelry had been fake. They knew my grandmother had set something up years ago. And they knew about the empty box. That part spread fastest. It always does. Because it was visible. Undeniable. And impossible to explain away. My mother tried. Of course she did. She's confused, she told people. She's older now. She doesn't remember things clearly. But it didn't stick. Too many people had been in that room. Too many had seen my grandmother that night, steady, sharp, fully present. The story didn't belong to my mother anymore. And without control of the story, she didn't know how to function. A week later, I drove back out to my grandmother's house. She was on the porch, just like always. Same chair. Same blanket. Same glass of iced tea. But something about her felt lighter. Like she'd been carrying something for a long time and had finally set it down. "How are you feeling?" I asked as I sat beside her. "Better," she said simply. I nodded. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, "I went to see Callahan." "I figured you would." "You didn't tell me it was everything," I said. She smiled. "I told you exactly what you needed to know." I let out a small laugh. "That's one way to put it." She reached over and took my hand. "I couldn't risk telling you sooner," she said. "You would have tried to fix it." She wasn't wrong. I would have, I admitted. "And your mother would have found a way to unravel it," she said. "She always does." I nodded slowly. "So you waited," I said. "I prepared," she corrected gently. That word again. Prepared. We sat there for a while, the afternoon sun stretching across the yard. Then she said, "What are you going to do now?" I thought about it. About the house. The land. The business I'd been building out of a spare bedroom. I said slowly, "I'm going to move out here." She turned to look at me. "Yeah?" "Yeah," I said. "Fix the place up. Expand my work. Actually build something. Something mine." She smiled. "That sounds right." 3 months later, the house looks different. The porch is repaired. Fresh paint, clean lines. The yard is alive again, new plantings, defined beds, pathways that make sense. I converted part of the property into a working design space. Clients come out now, walk the land, see the work in real time. My business didn't just grow. It changed. So did I. The empty box sits on the mantel inside. Not hidden. Not tucked away. Out in the open. A reminder. Not of what I didn't get. But of what I almost didn't see. My relationship with Ethan is better. Not perfect. But honest. Rachel calls sometimes. Careful conversations. Real ones, slowly. My mother hasn't called. But last week, I found a note in my mailbox. No envelope. Just folded paper. 4 words in her handwriting. I should have known. I read it once. Then I set it down. Because for the first time, I didn't need anything else from her. Every morning, before I start work, I walk past the framed note hanging by the front door. 7 words. Simple. Clear. Everything real is already in your name. I used to think inheritance was about money. About assets. About who gets what. I don't think that anymore. It's about being seen. Truly seen. And having someone care enough to protect that, even when it's hard, even when it takes time, even when it means staying quiet until the moment is right. My mother gave me an empty box in front of 52 people. My grandmother gave me 7 words under the table. One of those things was meant to define me. The other set me free. If you've ever felt like the overlooked one in your family, like the person who gets less, gets ignored, gets pushed to the side, I want you to hear this. Sometimes, what looks like nothing is actually everything waiting for the right moment to be revealed. And sometimes, the people who don't say much are the ones doing the most for you behind the scenes. That's my story. If it resonated with you, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Women Reddit Stories for more stories like this. And if you've ever been in a situation where you felt like you got the empty box, I'd really like to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. You never know who might need to read it.